Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today let's dive into an oil painting technique that was very frequently used in the Renaissance period, but that has retained its place and its usefulness within our modern world of modern art. I am talking of course about the glazing technique, which I believe is a bit of a source of questions and insecurities among artists that are starting out. So first of all, what in the world is glazing? Glazing in the world of oil paintings, of course, implies the laying down of a semi-transparent layer of very oily, thin paint, which does not cover up the underlying layer, but simply giving it a certain tint, a certain hue. So now you might ask yourselves why in the world one would not want to cover up the underlying layer. Well, there are different types of use cases, if you will. This is the technique that was mainly used in the Renaissance period for painting the skin tones. Because as you might be aware, what they did was to first create a grisaille, which is basically a portrait, for instance, or more generally speaking, a painting in black and white to lay down the color values. So you have the shadows, the mid-ground tones and the highlights, but they would not at that point touch any real pigment. So they would have this more or less black and white or brown and sepia toned painting completely done, and then they would proceed by laying down semi-transparent layers over layers over layers of a glaze. And this is how they would build up a very realistic looking skin tone. This is how they created depth to create something that is as complex as our skin tone. Of course, it is very rare that today one would paint a portrait in this way. However, it is still a technique that might be very interesting for us, but maybe in slightly different situations. For instance, you might be satisfied with how your painting looks or certain areas of your painting look, but you would want to achieve maybe something of a tonal shift. Which means you are happy with the overall balance of shadows and highlights of an area or an object, but you would want for the colors there to be more warm toned or on the contrary more cool toned, or maybe you would want to have some particular light effect, you know, how light at certain times of day is more warm. It might apply to shadows as well, if you want to create more of a contrast between the cooler looking shadows versus the more warm toned everything else in the landscape, right? So yeah, without having to repaint all those areas, you could simply shift the tone in this way by glazing over with the right hue. It is somewhat an equivalent of the filters that we have in photography, like presets, or I don't know, in more traditional shootings they had like gelatin filters that they put in front of the flashes in order to have a distinct hue in the photograph. So this is the oil painting version of this all, right? Because of course you can cover up your whole painting with glaze and not only smaller areas that you would want the change to happen in, but suppose you would want the whole of it to look more cool toned, or the whole of it having a distinct, I don't know, violet tint, then you would achieve this through glazing over very thinly, very transparently with violet. This brings us to the next question, and this is, how in the world do we achieve this semi-transparent effect? And the answer is a bit complicated. So first of all, quite logically, you would take a bit of paint and a lot of medium, which would achieve this semi-transparent effect to a certain point. But you also need to look out for the exact paints that you use, because not every paint is really perfectly well suited to achieve this effect. Now, I don't know whether you've noticed, but generally on the oil tubes you have either on front or on the back a little icon, which is more often than not a small square that is either full, so it's white or black, or it only has the outlines, or it is half filled in and half empty, right? So half black or white and half like transparent, and it only has the outlines. And this is effectively what indicates the opaqueness of the paint. So traditionally there are pigments that are more opaque and pigments that are more translucent, and this is how you know where your paint is situated on the scale. Of course, if you want to have an effective, very translucent glaze, you would opt for those paints that are either semi-transparent, so with the square half done in and half filled in and half empty, or better yet, if you have the completely empty square, which indicates quite transparent pigment. Now, to showcase how useful glazing can be, I would want to choose a very particular case and take the example of the painting that we've started a couple of videos ago together, which is the one of the Pictish warrior. As you might know, the Picts were called Picts by the Romans because they had painted bodies, or the warrior rather had painted bodies. And as you might remember through the video where I explained the sources of inspiration for this particular work, I've mentioned an illustration of an 18th century painter, I believe, who has done this striking sketch or illustration rather of a female warrior whose body was covered in floral tattoos that were very colorful. And this is definitely a detail I absolutely wanted to keep in my interpretation of this theme. And this is why I believe that glazing would be a perfect technique to achieve the effect that I'm going for. Namely, often tattoos are not completely opaque, but you can not only see the color of your skin, but also the texture of your skin, right? So it is even more so if it is not a blue or black tattoo, but a colorful one. And this is why I would like to glaze on the flowers on the body of my Pictish warrior and not cover it up with very opaque paint. In order to do so, let me take you through the different colors that I have chosen. Now, I have proceeded by color scheme, so I've pulled out a few blues and purples, several greens, a few reds and pinks, a yellow and other warmer tones to cover the whole range of flowers we will be painting. I then narrowed my choice to the following colors that were the most transparent of the lot. So this leaves us going from the left to the right with a transparent chromium green deep, a semi-opaque chrome green medium, a semi-opaque ruby red, a transparent alizarin crimson, a transparent bright orange, a semi-opaque Indian yellow hue, a semi-opaque cobalt blue hue, a semi-opaque ultramarine violet, and a transparent ultramarine deep. Just a quick pause in order to make a big announcement. This year I decided to launch an advent calendar of a sort. Discover each day an exclusive promo code that allows you to purchase one of my works at 50% of its original price. In order to know to which of my works the promo code applies, head over to my Instagram account that I will leave in the description down below. There will be no date the same, so if your heart is set on one particular work, I'd suggest you jump on the occasion when you see something that you like. I know that handmade, unique art will never be cheap, but this year I would like to make an effort in order to make it easier to acquire and give you the possibility to give to your loved ones or yourself an absolutely unique piece of art. And that's it for today, guys. I hope, as always, that you liked my little explanation and the sneak peek behind the curtains of how I create my different works. Maybe you like the glazing technique that much that you might be interested in reproducing it and trying it out for yourself. Maybe you have thought of a way of how this technique would improve your work or would be applicable to the rendering of a motif that you are currently working on. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and as always, I hope to see you very soon in my next video. Until then, have a lovely morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.